What's up, everyone? My name is Wes, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. For today's episode, I spoke with Dylan Hilliker, who makes music under the Horse Tornado moniker. He'll be releasing his debut album, The Great Pause, this Friday, March 19th. On top of his music, Hilliker founded the Rochester Music Festival, runs the Three Birds music label, and manages Why Not and Gully Boys. We talked about the long journey it took to get to this point in his musical career, his many ongoing projects, the record's inspirations, and a whole lot more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Dylan Hilliker of Horse Tornado on the Ear Coffee Podcast. How are you doing on this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm doing great, man. Just had dinner.
Yeah.
I am chilling at home, so hopefully we get a Timberwolves win tonight. That's what we're...
I don't know a lot about sports, but I'm not optimistic just from what little I've got. But hey, fingers crossed.
Yeah. It's not a great time to be a Minnesota sports fan, but when is it? So
kind of, yeah. Outside of the Lynx, pretty much, and sometimes,
yeah.
Every 5 years, the Vikings they make it to the playoffs.
Yep, that's our only redeeming qualities right now.
So I'm really excited to talk about your forthcoming record, but before we get into that, why don't you just do a little background, a little bit of an introduction for the people who aren't familiar with, especially your work with Horse Tornado, but even just what you've been doing for the last couple of years, because you've been pretty busy over the last half decade or so.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Dylan Hilliker. I am from Rochester, Minnesota, and I am a musician, producer, festival runner, booking agent, manager, kind of doing everything. So I started the Rochester Music Festival in 2016, and through that kind of met the bands that I'm managing today, Why Not and Gully Boys, and then through the pandemic, I've been playing in bands and doing that stuff before, but never really did a proper solo project.
Mm-hmm.
So through the pandemic, I just picked up my guitar again and just kind of played my little riffs, and they turned into songs. So
that's the process.
I can thank my my intermediate knowledge of Logic Pro and my beginner knowledge of guitar. This is how we got here.
We're going to dive into pretty much all of that you just alluded to. But
sure.
I like to start interviews in a pretty much identical way. I find that virtually anyone that makes music, especially has been making music for most of their lives, they have had a really close connection with music since they were younger, since they were growing up. And so I'm curious for you, what was that moment, or what are those memories where you really remember first connecting with, whether it's just a song or a band or anything, on a deeper level that kind of now led you to where you're at and what you've been working on?
Yeah, for sure. I was born in North Carolina. I was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I lived there for 10 years. And I was growing up, North Carolina is a big basketball state.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm tall. So, I started playing basketball when I was really young. And I was that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college and play basketball, and then I'm going to make it to the NBA and, all that kind of stuff. And as it revealed itself to me, that's obviously there are not a lot of people that can make it to the NBA. So, I found myself I was always, listening to music as a kid. My parents had an old, setup that they used to play out of just old speakers, and they would play Bonnie Raitt and James Taylor and kind of the classic singer-songwriter easy listening to music,
the Laurel Canyon kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom was went to school down in Nashville, and she's from North Carolina originally, so I feel she was kind of influenced by that, and the singer-songwriter stuff that was going along at the time. And then I took to discovering music, and kind of playing music. I started playing guitar when I was 7 or 8, and then quickly picked up drums after that because I was like, guitar is kind of boring. I want to like do something a little bit more physical. Maybe that was just the sports guy in me. I just like needed something macho to get at. But like, so I ended up falling into drums and just like ended up really digging deep into that. And but yeah, I think like it was so funny I was just talking about this morning. I went to Nashville to go to school at Belmont.
Oh, Belmont,
and I started working at the Ryman, which is like this old church on Broadway that has like a bunch of crazy shows. And that was when I was a sophomore, and the first person that I saw Ryman was Alison Krauss. And like that was the first concert I got to like sneak in from my post and see what was up. And that was like one of the artists I grew up on, so that was like a huge moment for me, kind of like coming full circle. But I think I was always like inclined to be musical when I was younger, even though it wasn't like something that was taught. Like my parents weren't musical. It just kind of like I fell into it just by listening and discovering my own stuff.
Yeah. What were your first creative ventures, like when you were beyond just like learning the instruments, when you were first maybe like experimenting with like songwriting as a teenager, or like first couple bands, even like pre-Dystonia, if there were any? Like what was that? Or was Dystonia your first, I guess, like formal
Dystonia
band?
wasn't my first project. I actually had a band with some friends in middle school. Shout out Nicholas Drive.
Nice.
And we played the like middle school talent show and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I feel like I was like so gung ho on it. Like once I knew that I could play drums and I knew that I could play them all right, I was just like, I need to find a band. Like we gotta like get famous like immediately. And so that was like my idea of being a kid star. But like that was kind of my first thing. And then like when I started Dystonia with Kevin, it was kind of like we both were kind of figuring out songwriting as it went, because like the middle school band was a cover band, we never wrote any original music. But I think me and Kevin were both trying to get at something, and so I ended up just kind of like writing about whatever, high school girl problems, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What was Dystonia what was that like, as just beyond kind of just opening your eyes to the idea of like songwriting kind of being a more, like, I don't even want to say professional, but like a more genuine band where you're actually like, we're a band instead of just we're middle schoolers playing covers for fun because we play our instruments and we're having a good time. Like, just talk a little bit about that, because that was active for like 2 years, I think. Active,
I mean, we had been like, we had always fed off each other musically, and Kev was learning how to play keys like as we went, so that was kind of like, it was a learning process for both of us, just kind of learning how to collaborate with each other and learning like weird stuff and like just like the basic stuff. I feel like we were so, even though we're like a hop, skip, and a jump away from the cities, like we were so just like in our own zone, like no one else that we knew was playing music, so we just kind of learned how to do all that by ourselves. So I think it was kind of like getting to that professional point where we were just kind of like trying to do everything ourselves. Like we were booking all of our own shows, we were writing all our music, we were recording all of our own stuff. And so even though it never really ended up going anywhere, I think that's kind of where I started to feel like, oh, maybe this is like my lane. Maybe like, this is something that, my city needs. And, eventually with like organizing the festival and that kind of stuff, it ended up being, something that there was a need for. And, so it was cool to like have that kind of like formative experience, even though I look back on the music and I'm just like, what were we doing? But yeah, it was a time.
It was definitely a time. How did you make the leap from Dystonia, kind of you just experimenting with that and going. Then you went pretty much right away to starting Rochester in 2016, and eventually a few years later working with Why Not and Gully Boys, kind of through your involvement in Rochester. How did you make that switch, kind of from a musical standpoint, from like actually playing the instruments to coordinating and managing and just putting this thing together, which only continued to grow over the 5 years it was in existence? I don't want to be like, maybe it'll come back. You can speak, maybe you can speak more to that than I can.
But of course.
How did you you went from one thing to something that was completely different. So how did that kind of affect your perception of music and of being in bands and just bands in general? Because it's such a drastic shift.
It's interesting. Like, I feel like because we had to do all of the stuff by ourselves, it was kind of like you kind of learn how to do it. And I think I have a lot to credit for Rochester just from my mom. She's highly entrepreneurial and, worked in nonprofit spheres and has, 10 side hustles going at all times. So like, she's obviously like the person that like I got this kind of like go-getter attitude from. But I think like, with the band, we didn't have a lot of places to play in Rochester. So pretty much the thing that started the festival was like, we ended up knowing some people who were in bands in Rochester that we thought were really cool and weren't really getting the kind of recognition that deserved. And so like when we started this festival, it was mostly about like getting our people a bigger platform, and like having a show where there was real sound and like real lights and people were paying to get into the show. That didn't really happen, and that didn't really happen in Rochester before the festival started. It's so weird to like talk about, because now like Rochester has ticket shows and everything, but we were right on the edge of like kind of making that stuff happen. And there's other groups like My Time My Music and the Rochester Posse that were putting on ticketed events and kind of like coming with us, but I feel like we were kind of like leading the youth in that way and kind of like trying to tell people like, yeah, it's okay to play music in Rochester. Like, it is a Midwestern, like smaller town. So like most people are, worried about sports, and obviously we have Mayo Clinic. So there are a lot of people worried about, getting a really good education. But, I think the creative stuff kind of falls to the wayside a little bit. And so like we were kind of able to pick that up, and I'm meandering now, but like,
you kind of had like your footloose moment in a way where you're like, we're bringing music to the city, like not quite as dramatically. No one was like trying to stop people from playing music, but there was no active resistance.
no active resistance. We were just young.
Father or whatever. So
the only active resistance was we couldn't play in bars because we're
21
old enough. So that was it.
Not a Rochester specific thing though. So kind of moving from that, technically the first Horse Tornado release was the little anthology you put up on Bandcamp in 2018, I think it was. And I think it's in one of like the little comments, it says that it was intended as the first and last Horse Tornado release. And other than with like the anthology, the kind of descriptor and title, it's like just a lot of pretty much everything you've been writing and working on for the past like 6 years. So was that always something you kind of wanted to do, even as you were working on Dystonia and kind of pivoted to Rochester? Were you always trying to write songs and create your own music, and then kind of hit that point where you uploaded the anthology? And what was your thought process behind intending that as like the first and only release for that moniker? So just talk about like those kind of, I don't even know if saying like the first years, but like just kind of your solo creative process as you were working on those songs. Because one of those songs at least did make it onto this new record that you're putting out.
Hmm.
So just talk about those early times of songwriting and leading up to the anthology in 2018.
Yeah, I think I had, when we were writing for Dystonia stuff, I would, I did the bulk of the writing, and then we, also wrote collaboratively. Um, but there's a lot of stuff that I, wouldn't get put on the records because it didn't really have the kind of vibe that we were going for. It was a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more moody. It was a little bit more singer-songwriter-y. And then I think like, through college, just kind of like being in a new place and not like, making friends right away. It just kind of like put me in the moodiness. And so, the anthology is kind of like just a collection of just like the songs that I was writing at the time. It's kind of like, you know, little beats that I was trying to make on Logic Pro, just like trying to learn how to do stuff. Um, so it kind of acts as like a journal more than anything, like
Yeah.
uh, and I think I was intending that to be the only thing. Like I was intending like I just kind of told myself like I needed to release something, like I couldn't just like sit on all this stuff. Like I needed to at least like put it out so that, put it out into the void, like
Yeah.
the void of the internet. But when the pandemic came around, I was I wrote another song and was just like on my laptop all night, just like working on it. And that's when I kind of was like, maybe I should do this
Mm-hmm.
like for real, because the anthology is like, it's just like voice memos and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was funny because like I was totally aware that I had said that was my first and last album as I was making the second
yeah.
album. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just kind of like a collection of thoughts from the past. I don't think it really fully even, um, encompasses all of what I was feeling
Mm-hmm.
in those years, but it was, a quick little synopsis of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like the quintessential Bandcamp only release where you have like years of demos before even putting out like any official release that's, I guess, receiving like the attention that like a record would usually deserve. It's getting put on all the different streaming
Yeah.
platforms and so on. So
Yep.
yeah, it's I always love when bands have that. You're like, oh, there's a little bit of backstory here for the extra curious or the
Yeah.
podcasters.
I also like that. So
Yeah.
that makes me feel good.
Yeah, nice. Uh, so especially like after you put up like the uploaded anthology for the 2 or 3 years when you weren't at least releasing and really writing music, it sounds like. What did your time away from actually making music kind of teach you about that, and whether that's something that you learned from working with Why Not and Gully Boys, who are obviously incredible bands in their own rights, and then you kind of touched on like just being around all these creative people for Rochester. What did
Mhm.
that teach you about kind of your own approach to music or your own like mentality about it? Now that you have a little bit of hindsight with the Horse Tornado record being completed and
Yeah.
like having a release date and everything.
Yeah, that's a great question. I I think like I was in those kind of 2 years between releases, I think I was really like just really hyper focused on the business stuff and like
Mhm.
getting my degree done at Belmont and like finding connections in the music industry. And I always knew I wanted to come back to Minnesota and do it here. So when I got involved in, Why Not and Gully Boys stuff, that was, a bigger reason for me to come back. But I think I've definitely learned so much from them. Just like it's great when you can see into someone's songwriting process and then someone's live show process. Like you get so much from a band from just seeing them set up,
Yeah.
and just seeing them like go through the motions of like writing a set list or like all that kind of stuff. And that was what I was doing, you know, as I was kind of like doing the Rochester stuff and just being able to speak with them and like all these bands and like kind of figure out what their processes were. I don't think I was ever thinking about, you know, making, you know, a solo record while I was doing it, but it definitely did, like, you know, it was an educational experience for sure. Just
you're
like,
like absorbing the information and not really
yeah,
having like a, you're not like, oh, I'll do that when I put out my record. Like, it's just like kind of just
right.
being around these people.
Yeah. And I think I've always been, you know, about the creative side, but I've always been really intrigued by the business side of music too. And just like how we can like distill this completely intangible art form and just like, you know, bottle it up and sell it to the world.
Yeah.
Like, so that was always, it's like this big puzzle for me. And like, making the festival was this big puzzle. And like, you know, it was a good type of challenge. And then like when I finally, you know, make this record, that was also a good type of challenge where, you know, I like it when I can mend the creative and the entrepreneurial spaces kind of together and work with those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually kind of getting into the Horse Tornado release, The Great Pause.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you just written your first song in years at the very beginning of the pandemic. What was going through your head when you first started writing that song and kind of just going back to this area that was familiar, but you hadn't really been in a while? What was that? What was your thought process going into that? What was kind of going through your head as you were working on that song and spending all night working on it? Usually that's a good indicator where you're just really excited about it and you're like, I want to finish this. I want this to sound good. And what song was that, if it did indeed make it onto The Great Pause?
Yeah, it was The One Who Forgets, which is like a kind of like a slower track in the middle of the record. But yeah, it was me off of two grain belt Northeast tall boys, just like kind of like in my basement of my parents' house, picking up my guitar again for the first time because I had nothing else to do. And the riff kind of came to me. And then I was like, you know, my brother had a little setup with like one of those like Shure PM47s, like the $25 microphones that you can get like, you know, pawn shops and that kind of stuff. So I had that and like, you know, was kind of going back and forth between, you know, my guitar and then singing a little bit and then trying to make a beat. It's on Logic. And so it was kind of fun. It's like, you know, another one of those puzzles that you get really excited about and you just want everything to kind of fit together, and you're doing a bunch of tinkering. And I think I just kind of fell in love with the simplicity of that riff and kind of like, you know, I throughout the years, you know, I've, you know, like always written down stuff that's like come to me, like, you know, just little like lines of poetry or stuff that I think would be cool as a lyric or stuff that I hear people say that it sounds good. And so like, it was kind of a collection of all that stuff. And I kind of went back into my notes and like, those were the lyrics and I just kind of fit them in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like going back on the puzzle theme. It's like, it's just fitting everything together. And I decided for this project, like at first I wanted it to be like kind of a field medic kind of thing where it was like beans and an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And then as I brought it into the studio, it got a lot bigger and a lot more complex, but that was kind of the main thing. I was like, I can't play guitar very well, so I'm going to play the most simple thing possible. Yeah. And then I know like the rhythms that I want, so I'm going to spend 6 hours trying to program this drum beat. And that's just kind of how it was. And then like, you know, as the pandemic went on, there, you know, there wasn't shit to do. So like, it was like
Yeah.
it was just like, why not just like, try to process what was going on and process what was in my head, and um, kind of like take that, um, boredom and pain and fear, and kind of like make it into something that was productive.
Yeah, try and
And
be
kind of,
cathartic with it.
yeah, and takes your mind off, how like terrible the world was at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
So, and that's like kind of the thesis of the record. Like the Great Pause is like what me and my mom, thought of one night, where we were like, yeah, this is the Great Pause. Like it's a resetting for everyone. Like
Hmm.
everyone. And I think that's true for me, especially because it was, I had been doing the business stuff and the school stuff for so long that I had
Yeah.
never like given myself the chance to be creative. So in that like pause, I was just able to kind of like reconnect with that
Hmm.
area.
Yeah. Did you, when you were working on that song, were you even really having like the first inkling that this might be a record, or you might work on more songs and just kind of turn this into what would eventually be the Horse Tornado record, or was that something that came further along as you were maybe just having a beer or two and then work on another riff one at a time and be like, hey, I've worked on like 3 or 4 songs.
Yeah.
What if I turn this into a record? What if I worked on this to actually make a record?
Yeah. It started off being the idea of an EP. It was kind of like,
Okay.
like it was like in basketball, like, when you just shoot and you just can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not to be like heady, like I'm not saying the songs are superior, but like it was just kind of like the ideas all came together and just kind of flowed together. So,
Yeah.
every day it was like, here's this new idea, write a little bit of that, finish the song. Here's this
Mm-hmm.
new idea, finish the song. Like, so it was like that for, like a week or two straight. And that was when I was like, oh, this could really be a thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then, kept on writing and writing, and then it ended up being an album. So
Mm-hmm.
we started from there and got to here somehow.
Yeah. So were most of these songs written during that first, like those 2 weeks, or with the exception, obviously, of Wailing was the one kind of holdover from the anthology.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the timeline for most of these songs as you were really, at least writing like the acoustic, the Logic Pro, the non-studio versions of these songs before you went in and they grew a lot and you fleshed them out a lot? Were they
Yeah.
all kind of just in those first couple weeks, first month or so of the pandemic or so, or was it like a more
Yeah, it
extended
was.
period?
Yeah, it was. I think, most of the songs came out of that kind of like initial spurt
Mm.
of stuff. And then, as it was like getting to be recording time, I was like, oh shit, I probably need one song there, or like, another song there. So,
Mm-hmm.
some of them were kind of like written out of like, almost necessity. Like I was trying to get at the place I was going, but
Mm-hmm.
they were all, they're all unique in the way that they were conceived. And I think like this is the first time I felt really good about like not only the music but the lyrics to everything. So like I feel really confident about what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was all written, before um, like anything was open in Minnesota, at least.
Mm-hmm. Was your relationship with your mother really like important, essential for how you approach the record, how you when you're working on it, beyond even just like that conversation that kind of that gave the album its title, that gave you that thematic touch point of kind of everything you're
Mhm.
trying to speak to emotionally and lyrically? Because it sounds like she's been a really big supporter and inspiration for you just throughout your entire
Yeah.
venture into music, whether Rochester or Horse
Yeah.
Tornado.
Hmm. Yeah. She's super important to me. I think my parents are me. And so like, and it's one of those things where like I feel I'm a very like external processor.
Mm-hmm.
So like I need to like talk shit out.
Yeah.
And so like my parents are good at that. My dad's a psychologist, and
Oh.
my mom is a was a social worker, now is a
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit worker. So obviously I was like extremely um for lack of a better word, blessed
Mm-hmm.
to have those parents. And like definitely it helped the songs out a lot, just to like kind of talk about what I was trying to get at. I would show him my demos, and my dad would always be like, "What's this song about?" And I would be like, "It's about this," and kind of like grasping at straws. I feel like I write in a very like subconscious way, so I never really quite know what I'm getting at until I look back at it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is really about this."
Yeah.
And we can talk more about that if you want to talk about songs specifically. But yeah, that's kind of the deal.
Yeah. When you were especially like getting the lyrics down, not even really addressing the music, what were some of like the specific things you were really trying to address? Like, what were you taking like some lyrical inspiration from, and like the through lines that you were getting at thematically, even beyond just kind of like the umbrella of Reset and this moment in time that we're all still essentially in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
and still kind of exploring and learning how we're dealing with it in real time. So yeah, I'm also interested, like, since when you wrote these songs, those lyrics are going to be a snapshot of how you were doing in those moments. Do you still, like, when looking back at them, do you still feel like those are representative of how you feel, how you felt then and how you feel now? And like, just talk a little bit about like that. It's like the lyrics specifically and the ideas you were trying to get across. That I think people that either read the lyrics on Bandcamps or listen really closely are going to pick up on.
Yeah, yeah. The lyrics are definitely very um, reflective. Like I come from a place when I'm writing of just like kind of taking it all in,
Mm.
getting it out. So sometimes I'll have a song that's about two or three things, or three or four things, like
Yeah.
and it's never like, it's kind of just like little snapshots that I'm kind of putting together
Yeah.
one
Like
by
the
one.
puzzle
But
analogy. Each song is a little puzzle.
exactly, yeah, I'm really honing in on the puzzle analogy now. I hadn't even noticed that until now, but yeah, I think it was like or, um I found a lot of inspiration from old stuff that I had written, or like little notes in my phone. And um yeah, I think a lot of it is just kind of like taking stock of the past couple of years. And um I didn't want to be like super. I tried really hard not to be super like heady or like cliche, or
Yeah.
Dystonia was a lot of songs about girls. I didn't want to write a song. I didn't want to write a song about a girl. Like I wanted it to be more like universal, as in like I wanted to tap into like what I was actually feeling, as in and kind of like give myself that challenge, because I felt like a lot of the lyrics I wrote in the past were about other things and other people, and I wanted to like really kind of like dig deeper into what I was feeling. And I think it was really easy because it was such a period of self-reflection for most people.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like where the lyrics came from. It's it's a very subconscious process. You kind of like put it all down and then start to piece it together as it goes. But I think it's really important for me to like write stuff that not only that I feel good about, but that people can also like find their own meaning in. I think that's super important, because I feel like a lot of the songs, sometimes when you start to explain them, when you hear an artist explain like, oh, it's about this, and you were always thinking, oh, it's about this, it kind of ruins the song for you sometimes.
Yeah.
So
no,
it's intentionally vague.
Yeah, and that's kind of also part of why I at least personally hate asking like, what was this song specifically about? Because I think,
Yeah.
especially with like, it sounds like the way you wrote these lyrics, that's very counterintuitive to how you want people to interpret them and how they were initially written, whether you were even aware of that in the moment. Um,
Yeah, and I'm always finding new meaning in like what the lyrics were talking
mhm.
about, just like listening back through the masters. I'm just like, oh, maybe this was actually about this. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's some lyrics where it's like really head on, like, the Great Pause, like the title track, that was, me driving um, this, like through Chicago and through this big neighborhood and like thinking about like, oh, there's so many people that are just like in these houses and
Mm.
living, and I don't know any of them. So that's
Yeah.
like, there's so many lives that aren't our own line.
Yeah.
But I think most of them are kind of like trying to figure out
Yeah.
what I'm feeling.
Yeah. Um, that reminded me, especially with talking about driving through Chicago and the lyrics of the Great Pause. Um,
Yeah.
there's this Japanese term called mono no aware, I think is how you say it, or mono no aware, and it's pretty much just
Mm.
an awareness of the transience of things. Where like you're driving, this might even be completely wrong of what I'm thinking of, but like just an awareness of the lives of others and how you have no idea
Yeah.
what's going on with them. Like, and you can even just
Yeah.
like driving down the highway, like in rush hour, you're surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands, of people that you will never meet. You'll never interact with. They're all on their own journeys,
Exactly.
which is always kind of crazy to think about.
It's always a trip, and like it's so funny because my mom was like, I think you're gonna write the last song that you need, because I was needing like one more song to finish out this record,
Hmm.
and she was like, I think you're gonna write this last song on your way. I was going out to New York to see my girlfriend, and she's like, I think you're gonna get it. And sure enough, like 2 hours into the drive, I was like, I
You get
had
it.
it all. And I was like, I have the lyrics, I have the song, like I have to go and demo this immediately. So I was up till like 3 a.m. in a hotel in Akron, just like like demoing out this stuff. And a lot of the same sounds that I use like, fake bass and fake guitar
Hmm.
and all that stuff. A lot of those sounds are still on the actual like final recording. So you
Hmm.
can you can go and try to find them out.
Yeah, that's that musician lifestyle. That recording in a hotel room.
Yeah,
Instead of being on tour,
exactly.
it's just you're on a road trip. Um,
Exactly. It all feels like tour. Everything feels like tour.
if you just convince yourself it is, it'll be like, oh, this is great. Um,
Yeah.
was there any consideration of revisiting other songs either that were on the anthology release you put out, or songs from that era outside of Wailing? Like, or was that just the one song that really stuck out and like musically and lyrically you still connected with and felt like connected with the rest of what you were writing about on the record?
Yeah. I think when I wrote the first song, it was so different than all the other stuff that I had
Hmm.
written previously. So obviously I was thinking about it because, like it's really easy to just like repurpose songs and just kind of figure out the different arrangements and everything.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to just like have a fresh start and like really dig into what I was doing in the present. But with Wailing, it was like one of those like things that was in my phone, in my voice memos, and I'd listen to it every once in a while, and I just loved how it felt like information or like
Hmm.
a meditative kind of thing. And so when we were looking for like I was kind of looking for a intro track for the record.
Hmm.
I knew I wanted like something um, that one just kind of stood out, and you know um, Zach Zern, who was the producer on the record and recorded the record with me, um, layered all those vocals and stuff, and um, it was so good. I was like, I was crying in the booth. I was like, I was like, damn, this is like, actually, it's getting at intention of the song that I wrote when I was 15, like,
Yeah.
so it was cool to finally see that one like come together.
Yeah. I think it's cool that that is specifically the intro track. It feels like it's kind of bridging the gap between the between Anthology and everything you're working on around that time and
Yeah,
Great
definitely.
Pause now.
Yeah.
Yeah, since you just mentioned Zach, this feels like a good time to ask about what was it like in the studio working with Zach for all the engineering, and then working with your friends and like the guys in Green Top, I think Isaac and Henry, but not Josh from Why Not, and then
Yeah.
Kevin, your old bandmate.
Yeah.
What was it like working with all these different people, and like what did they all bring to the fold? And I'm curious, since this record started out so solo, like so individual, so singular with just you and Logic and your guitar.
Yeah.
Did the Sun, like this communal nature of having all these other people collaborate with you, did that kind of shift your understanding of any of these songs or how you were kind of thinking about the record as a whole once like you were really hearing what they all brought to the table?
Yeah. I think, to answer the question you just asked, like I think the songs were very set in stone at the beginning, like the what I was trying to get across. But I just like I knew I needed to like actually do the thing. Like I'd never been in a studio to record my shit before, like, and I just knew I needed to like be in there and like get with Zach, and like, Zach is like one of those dudes that I just like trust so much with my creative vision, and we've done co-producing kind of things in the past, and so the money thing was the biggest issue of why I couldn't get in there and like do everything in there, but we got some like recording shit, and I did acoustic guitar in my basement and had Wyatt Moran come and play bass on the tracks. Most of the like sampling and the drums that you hear are from just like me like tooling around in Logic Pro. And when I got into the studio, I'd sent the demos out to the Why Not boys, and they were just like, these are really cool songs, like we'd love to like come and collaborate. And I was like, yeah, I need more voices than just mine. I think like in the production sphere, I don't super know what I want. So like if we can just throw a bunch of ideas at the wall and like get Isaac in there and get Kevin there, like people who I really trust creatively, that's really what ultimately like finished the record. Like the songs were there, but it was kind of about like changing up like the instrumentation or the orchestration of everything to kind of make it like realize their full potential. So yeah, like Zach played a bunch of stuff on here. Wyatt played bass on most everything, I think, except for Urgency. Henry played bass on that. And then Henry and Zach played some keys. Both Isaacs, James, and Dell played electric guitar. And then Kev laid down some piano. So the sessions were so fun. Like it was just, us, getting drunk on a Tuesday night and figuring out how to play these songs. So that was cool.
That's a homie moment right there. That's a good time.
Major homie moment.
How did you balance working on this record, even once like the songs were all written, like the chords were there, the lyrics were there, with putting on Rochester 5 in the spring, or I guess early summer, and then also launching Three Birds, the your new record label that launched like a couple months ago, and has put out a few, like this is I think going to be the second or third release.
Yeah, this will be the second one.
Because Wyatt's EP just came out like a week or so ago. How did you balance working on this record, working on The Great Pause, with all the other stuff you were either kind of just... I mean, Rochester, I feel like at this point would have been a pretty familiar environment because it was year 5. You've been doing this for half a decade, and then doing Three Birds and really getting that in motion and getting like the seeds of that planted as you were working on this record.
Yeah. Rochester was great because it was really like out of my control at that point. Like it was cool because of the live stream aspect. I have no idea how to live stream. So we had, Treedom do the video and then Carpet Booth do the sound. So like obviously it was just like me showing up and just watching. Like it's so fun. It was just me show up, like get to talk to my favorite artists and like just chill, which was great. And then I got to do some interviews and do that kind of stuff. Played your role for a little bit. But then like that was kind of like the record was, I knew I was going to record it at Carpet Booth at that time, and it was officially a record, so it was more of just like a break. I was doing those things kind of in conjunction, and do Rochester in the daytime, write music at night kind of deal. Turn on the business brain and the creative brain at separate times. And I've been thinking about starting a label just because there wasn't anything in Minnesota, and I knew I wanted to have something to put my management under that was unique to the vision and the spirit of what Rochester was. And so it took a long time to like figure out the name and figure out the branding and all that kind of stuff. But we landed on Three Birds, and it's really representative of like what the Rochester logo was, like three geese flying overhead. And I have it tattooed on me, so I gotta keep it rolling. But yeah, I wanted to like have a space where Minnesota artists could put out their stuff, and I could really try to advocate for that in the scene. And I'm moving up to Minneapolis in August actually, so hopefully once the pandemic's over I can get out to more shows and start building out the label a little bit more. But it was really kind of like an idea, a project, just something I'd never done in the music industry, and so I wanted to give it a shot, and it's been good so far. Can't complain.
It's just early enough where it's still kind of up in the air, but it's good that it's feeling good so far.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you hope people take away from like their first couple listens to The Great Pause? And you already kind of touched on this, where you wanted it to be very universal and where people would have their own reactions, responses, and things that they pick up on. But if you had to kind of like put into words something, or like what you want people to really hone into, what you hope, whether they do or not is up to them. It's out of our control. But what do you hope people connect with when they're hearing this record for the first time, and even hearing the next couple singles that are to be released as of recording?
For sure. Yeah. I hope that people can find their own meaning. I hope that it gets included in the Midnight Drive playlists. Like I want it to be a very like reflective and contemplative album for everyone, and I hope that they listen to it from front to back, from 1 to 9. And not shuffle like Spotify tries to do sometimes.
People that shuffle albums are like unhinged. That's just
psychopaths.
It's
psychopaths.
It's terrifying. How do you do that?
I don't know. Yeah, like my girlfriend told me that she like I sent her this album, and she told me that like she was on this song. I was like, wait, that's the 6th song. You can't have listened to that much. And she's like, oh, I'm on shuffle. I said, wow. Like I had to give her a talking to. But it's all love. I don't care if you listen out of order, as long as you listen and stream. That
ultimately that's the core desire. But people should be.
I'd like to buy a sandwich from this album. Hopefully,
like a
nice meal,
a single like Taco Bell taco.
Yeah, like, exactly. I would like to get one quesarito for this album, please.
That's pretty ambitious. Quesaritos are big. That's like
Yeah.
like the common like touring joke where it's like the band made enough money from each show to buy like a case of beer and like a single thing from Taco Bell or from like a restaurant, and you're like, look, we did it. We're a real band.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
That's the dream, though.
Yeah, it is one of those things.
This is a bit in advance because the album doesn't even come out for about a month from when we're recording this. But what are your future hopes and plans for Horse Tornado? Is it something you think you're gonna continue throughout the years, just as your creative outlet as a solo artist, even as you, I'm guessing, continue to work with different collaborators, or is this going to be the second and also second last Horse Tornado album?
Yeah, I'm just gonna call everything my last album so that it gives people that urgency to listen to it. No, I think like I want to play some shows on this. I've been envisioning, I play a bunch of songs where there's like 2 drum sets, or there's like 1 electronic, 1 acoustic. I'm dreaming of 2 drum sets. Hopefully me and someone else. And I'm hoping that I get to play some shows on this record once it is safe to do so. And I'm also hoping, I don't know if there will be another album, if it'll just be kind of like a single every once in a while, but I think this will be like, I spent so long like fighting against the Horse Tornado thing just because I thought it was stupid when I put it out, but I think it's like, it's very fitting. It's like takes you a minute to realize that it's just a merry-go-round. So
yeah, I did not realize that.
Yeah, I saw it in a Huffington Post article.
Okay, just took it at face value.
I saw it in a Huffington Post article. It was like funny names for everyday things, and that's where it came from. So, but yeah, I think it's just kind of like one of those things where I will always have it on hand in case I need it, but it's not a project that I'm like, trying to build in any way.
Yeah, like
it's really for me and the
have
homies.
A record like every 2 or 3 years, like most bands. It's just going to be like like not break glass.
Yeah, I'll Frank Ocean it a little bit. I'll make people wait. If they do like this one, then maybe I'll have to write another one.
In 5 years, you'll put out like a weird experimental video record to get out of your contract with your own label.
Exactly. Yeah, my own label. I'll get on my own contract with my own label.
Like, these guys suck. Who runs this label? This is terrible.
I need a break from myself.
Cool. So, those are pretty much my questions about the record. But since you have been, even from a distance, been pretty involved in the scene, just being aware of a lot of different bands, what local artists and musicians and bands have you kind of had in your rotation recently, just as a listener? Like, there's the moment to shout out the homies, shout out your friends' bands, shout out anyone that's like put out anything semi recently that you're really enjoying, really engaging with.
Obviously stream the Three Birds artists. Why Not, Gully Boys, Wyatt Moran. I did some drums on that Wyatt Moran EP, and I think it's just so good. I've loved to see him like grow, and I think the new Gully Boys and the new Why Not stuff are also equally insane, and there's lots of big things down the pipe, which is awesome. But let's see, Minneapolis bands that I love. I think there's this whole new wave that's coming, and it's really exciting because it's like mostly female or like femme-led bands, which is so sick. Like Keep for Cheap and Vile and Dad Bod and Bugsy are some of those bands that I'm just like, I'm so happy that people are finally paying attention. I think Keep for Cheap is so fucking sick. I love that song, Forgive Me. I tell them about it every time I see them. every time I see them on social media, I'm like, Forgive Me is my favorite song.
That's facts though.
but yeah, I think there are like a couple of things. Like I think Baby Boys is one of the best projects to come out of Minneapolis in a while, and I'm super excited for that to come out. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think. That's what I have off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of Papa and Bai, and Milo, of course.
Yeah.
Like those two are, I think, going to be the biggest people out of Minneapolis that we will see in our generation.
Yeah. For sure with Milo, I would not be surprised about that.
Yeah.
Dude's already pretty much blown up.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Good for him though. I mean, he played Rochester year 3, and he was in the emerging artist showcase, so not even the regular showcase.
Yeah.
And then
I remember I saw
he
that
got
when I was
so big.
looking that up. Yeah. It's crazy to like look at stuff like that where it's like that was before he'd even put out like or just when he'd put out his first EP in like 2018, I think.
Yeah, and he was playing with just some kids. I think he was playing with like kids from Marmalade and like completely different band than what he has now. Like, so I'm really happy for Bobby, man. He's killing it. Like, I'm just so excited for that. Like the whole entire Minneapolis scene, I feel like is just like poised to really make a run at it once this pandemic is over. So it's really exciting to see everyone kind of gearing up. And once shows comes back, I'm sure it's going to be a insanely cathartic experience for everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. So thank you so much for chatting. This is awesome. The Horse Tornado record is out March 19th. By the time you're hearing this, there will probably be another couple singles out, I believe. So check those out if you haven't already. Definitely listen to the full record when it's out. It's good for those late night drives. It's good. It's a good introspective record. I think it's a really cool release to check out. So thank you so much, Dylan. It was awesome to chat to you finally after kind of orbiting each other for so long. It was good to sit down, albeit digitally, and talk about the record.
Yes, thank you so much for reaching out and for having me.
The Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @Ear Coffee. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.